Despite the fact that we are living in an era in which seemingly any random Z-list comic book character is getting their very own standalone live-action blockbuster movie adaptation, it feels like Hollywood has no patience with any of them. I mean, don't get me wrong, they'll take a swing with pretty much anyone, but if that movie isn't the biggest goddamn hit you've seen in your entire life, you can be rest assured that that character is going right back to the back of the line. Doesn't matter how popular they are. Hulk got a couple of chances back in the 2000s, but no more. Wonder Woman's currently in timeout for an undisclosed amount of time. Fantastic Four comes out once a decade and blows it every time without fail. We'll see how they do next year. Green Lantern has been in the dumpster for years, and who the hell knows when we will ever get another Flash movie after last year's Ezra Miller debacle. Okay, it's a lot.
There might not be a future.
And by the way, I don't think that it's some great injustice. This is just how the industry works. If you have a movie that bombs and or is not received well, chances are that studio is not going to be willing to step on that rake again. It just is what it is. Even the world's most iconic and beloved superhero, Superman, is not immune from this treatment. You give them any reason to put you in timeout, any at all, and they won't hesitate to put you there and forget that they did.
My name is Darren, and I am not a dick!
So, even though Hollywood has pumped out more comic book movies than any of us can watch, most of the iconic known superheroes have had one, maybe two adaptations. And even the successful ones that have gotten trilogies or appearances across franchises have generally only been done by one actor in one very specific style. Hell, even Spider-Man, who bucks this trend more than most and has had 3 distinct film adaptation eras, still has felt more or less the same across his 8 live-action movies. Only after his traditional formula had been done so many times and consistently made money did we finally get something different and unique in the Spider-Verse films. And the fact that we even have those is like a minor miracle. What I'm trying to get at here is that these characters really don't get that many opportunities to be in the good graces of Hollywood executives, and as a result, most of their movie adaptations tend to be unimpressive and safe and just kind of bland. You're not going to see much of an evolution of them on screen or ever get to a point where a studio has the balls to get weird with them or dive into their deep comic book roots. Again, it's just not how the Hollywood game is played. But then you have the character of Batman, a character that, aside from the 1970s, has been adapted every single decade since the 60s, been passed along to 7 different actors, 6 different directors, has been done silly, been done serious, has had all-time bad movies, has had all-time great movies. I mean, he's gone through about as much as one character can in Hollywood, and that train ain't stopping anytime soon. We're about to have 2 Batmen going at once, and it's not even that crazy of an idea. That's how set in stone Batman's presence in movies is. I mean, could you imagine if there were like 2 Captain Americas going at once? You just couldn't do that. You couldn't even suggest that, but WB can just drop on a random Tuesday that, hey, there's gonna be 2 Batman, and our reaction is just, sure, why the hell not? How about 3? Who cares? I mean, the guy even has a star on the Walk of Fame now, so he's officially as cool as Lassie in Big Bird.
Where were the other drugs going?
Point being, the character has been on the silver screen for a long time now and has gone through wildly different eras and adaptations, which among superheroes is totally unique. Not only has he had more than like 1 or 2 shots, but the films are almost never played safe. In fact, you never quite know what you're gonna get with each new movie, which is why, for me personally, I've always had some amount of love for each and every one. A new director and actor will come in and shake that snow globe up in ways that you just never expect. Granted, not always for the best, but at the very least, they're always gonna be interesting.
Suit me up, Uncle Alfred.
There is no Batman equivalent to Superman Returns or X-Men Apocalypse or MCU installment number 26. Every single one is memorable and worth at least one watch, no matter how good or bad it might be. There are no skips in the Batman movie catalog.
Remember, you are my number 1 guy.
And yet, despite all the incarnations and actors and tones and different visions for The Dark Knight, in my opinion, there really hasn't been a Batman movie that gets Batman, if that makes sense. A lot of them have come close in some ways and understand like one or two pieces of the Batman puzzle, but they all lack that full, true understanding of the character and the world. That is, except for Matt Reeves and his movie, The Batman. This movie is so unbelievably good and so aware of what makes the Batman character work that I still find myself shocked by it even years after its release. It just doesn't make sense to me that a Batman movie like this even exists. And not because it's good. Again, we've had plenty of great Batman movies in the past. Having yet another one is nothing crazy. I find it unreal not because of its quality, but by how it sheds every piece of baggage and legacy and expectation from all the previous Batman film iterations and totally redefines what a Batman movie should be, how it should look, how it should sound, how Batman should act, what the narrative should be focused on, everything. Any established logic is thrown out the window and replaced with something not just good in its own right, but something that shows such a deep understanding and love for the source material, and more importantly, an awareness of how to make that character work in a movie. Matt Reeves just had all the right answers in a way that, again, seems impossible, like he's cheating on a test. The man's got the goddamn blueprint written down on the inside of his water bottle.
I always think of filmmaking as a kind of, you're going on a search, and you're searching for the things that stick with you. On this movie, what started the process was I just started reading comic books. I went back to 1939, and I just basically did a deep dive in the comics, and anything connected, I just wrote down.
I mean, you listen to his commentary over the movie, and virtually everything he says is exactly what you want to hear as it pertains to a Batman movie. It's just check after check after check. He knows exactly what he's doing.
All of the stuff here, I thought, okay, we have a year 2 Batman. This isn't an origin tale. We're going to start right inside of his head, and how do we do that? Let's start in his journal.
And that's not to say that the previous Batman movies have no value or aren't the real Batman, as if that's something we can even measure, but like most superhero movie adaptations, or frankly any Hollywood adaptation at all, they end up getting rung through that Hollywood machine and come out looking like something totally different than what you expected.
Just the pussy I've been looking for.
You look at something like Batman 89, and you have a lot of the bones of a good Batman story in there. A somewhat dark Batman, a fantastical Gotham City, a larger-than-life crazy villain, a mysterious Bruce Wayne. A lot of it is there, but the more you watch it, and especially the more you watch its sequel, Batman Returns, the more you realize that Tim Burton really doesn't give a shit about Batman. Not in a way that he hates Batman. In fact, I think it's obviously safe to assume that he does like it, but only so far as he can imprint his weird Tim Burton-isms onto it. I don't think he gives one single shit about the lore, or backstories, or character motivations, or how characters should look, or really anything tied to any basis in the comics, which is fine and certainly makes for some fun movies, especially the disgusting, horny masterpiece that is Batman Returns. I mean, what a film that is, but his primary target demographic is, and always has been, himself.
Oswald Cobblepot, filling the void. I'd like to fill her void.
If he made those movies 10 years later, he would have had Johnny Depp playing an awkward, bumbling Bruce Wayne, solving a crime in a dreary New England town in which the main villain is Two-Face, but one of his faces is a literal skeleton, and his motivation is being horny for like Winona Ryder or something.
The best kind of prize is a surprise.
Which, now that I'm saying it out loud, does sound pretty awesome, but the point is, Tim Burton's idea of Batman is whatever Tim Burton wants it to be that day. And this really is the core theme of all the previous Batman movies, good and bad. I mean, the same thing obviously goes for good old Joel Schumacher. His idea of comics were that they were unserious, Looney Tunes-esque farces, so that's what he made.
Can I persuade you to take a sandwich with you, sir? I'll get drive-through.
It's just whatever he thought would be fun to make, which, you know, to his credit, did result in some pretty memorable movies, if nothing else.
Allow me to break the ice. My name is Freeze. Learn it well, for it's the chilling sound of your doom.
I mean, after all, people, they're called comic books, not drama books.
7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
And then we get to Christopher Nolan. Now, he definitely did a lot for the cause here by first and foremost taking the character seriously. This is in fact a drama book. Both Batman and Gotham are made to be realistic and modern, and the films feel more or less like any other crime movies that just happen to have a Batman as the lead character. All that stuff works, though as a result, most of the fantastical noir elements of Gotham are totally stripped out, leaving it feeling a bit bland and unrealized. Gotham really isn't much of a character in these movies. He also doesn't seem to have a ton of interest in the Bruce Wayne character outside of like the first chunk of the first movie, preferring him to be this kind of paragon of virtue to run up against his real interest being the Batman villains, which is a thing that all these Batman directors all have an issue with. They just cannot seem to make Bruce Wayne a compelling character.
All this, it's not me. It's inside. I am more.
Now, they can all do the villains just fine for what each of them are trying to go for, but Batman is always this kind of boring guy who they can only make relatable if he is fawning over some lady. That is their one tool in the toolbox. Is there a hot woman nearby? If the answer is yes, Batman is madly in love with her. That's his character.
Which one you going after?
So he's more often than not reduced to a side character in his own movies. I mean, The Dark Knight, which is universally considered the best Batman movie of all time, is really a Joker movie. It's more of a Joker movie than the actual Joker movie, especially at this point. To his credit though, Nolan is not totally driven by his own personal idea of what he wants Batman to be like Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher, and does clearly take a lot of inspiration from the comics, but like most Hollywood adaptations, much of the specific comic book elements are filed down on the altar of being realistic and serious, as if there's just no way you could take any of this shit seriously otherwise. Granted, it does make for some good movies, obviously, there is no denying that, but comic book movies, these are not.
Well, a guy dresses up like a bat clearly has issues.
And then with Zack Snyder, you have a similar situation to Burton and Schumacher where his Batman is, again, whatever the hell he wants him to be. In this case, essentially, the Punisher. I mean, hot damn, this guy be punishing. Now, admittedly, because of the unique situation of the Snyder Batman not being in a traditional standalone movie where it's him against one of his usual bad guys, Batman is not an afterthought and does have some good character stuff going on. Time is paid to give him sufficient motivation beyond being horny, and aside from him being perhaps a bit too gullible and dumb in BVS, he actually works pretty well, I think. Though, of course, like with Superman, Snyder's interest in superheroes is entirely in the mythology of them. He doesn't really view them as people. To him, they are just angsty, godlike entities that can't smile to save their lives. Still a valid take, but again, doesn't exactly make for very compelling characters.
Why did you say that name?
Snyder, though, does get big points for me for being the first guy of all these directors to actually consider the idea that Batman maybe should look cool, which I know sounds silly and unimportant in the grand scheme of things, but this is a genuine issue that every Batman movie has. Previous iterations, cool costume or not, cool actor or not, there really isn't much mind paid to how Batman should be shot, or how the light should hit him, or if he should look cool in a fight and actually have moves beyond just slamming into people, or whatever that one weird elbow move is in the Nolan movies, or if he should look capable of movement that doesn't seem extremely uncomfortable, or if he should be able to turn his fucking head independent of his torso. These are all questions that all these directors fail to ask. I mean, not to get too off track, but getting back to Nolan, this is something that I just cannot get over with those movies. Batman looks like such a goofy little dork in them.
Falcone sent them to kill you.
Why?
You rattled his cage.
He looks terrible when he runs, or glides, or perches. The fight scenes are painfully simple and barely choreographed. There are so many moments where Christian Bale is doing something stupid with his mouth, not to mention the whole voice thing, which makes everything sound so unserious. I mean, it's good for memes, we all love it, but you just cannot take anything seriously in the Bale throat cancer voice.
Where's the trigger? Where is it? You never give it to an ordinary citizen. Where is it? Where's the trigger?
The only times in those movies that he came off cool in the slightest was when he was standing still and shot from a distance. That's it. Zack Snyder, though, to his credit, puts a lot of work into the cool factor, which is easily his best contribution to the character, as simple as that may sound. I mean, low-key, it might be the single most important addition to any live-action Batman before Matt Reeves. Okay, it was pretty bad there for a while. And again, just to be clear, I like most of these movies. I'm glad that we have these wildly different takes on the character. That's the magic of having an ongoing franchise like this. You get a lot of variety. The character is kind of like James Bond in that way. What I do have an issue with, though, is that there is no baseline. There is no attempt by any of these adaptations to actually adapt the character that exists in the comics and bring that version to life. What you see with all these directors is this consistent idea that sure, the comics are great and all, they're cute, they're fun, but I can make this shit better. My vision is what people need to see. My Batman is serious and realistic, and mine has no issue murdering 8,000 people, and mine lives in a haunted Alice in Wonderland, and mine has nipples and visible bulges for some reason.
I want a car. Chicks dig the car.
It's not an issue that they're putting their own spin on the character. In fact, that's what they should be doing, but they aren't considering why people actually like this thing in the first place. They don't view the comics or any other medium Batman exists in as equal to what they are doing. So yeah, we have a lot of Batman movies out there, and I, like most people, enjoy almost all of them. But despite how many we have, it seems like no one ever just tried to make a Batman that resembles the Batman found in the comics. You know, the place where he is most beloved. Because I don't think that most of these directors like the comics, and a few of them I doubt even like Batman at all. And that is exactly why I love the Matt Reeves version so much, because he is the only one of these guys that I can say for sure actually likes Batman. I'm sure all the other ones like their own Batman, at least I hope so. But this guy, whether he was directing a Batman movie or not, would consume Batman media in some way. I have no doubt. And that matters, not for the sake of comic accuracy or any of that. I mean, last thing you want is a fan film, but you just want someone that respects the thing they are doing, that likes the thing they are doing, that has an interest and a willingness to explore the material beyond the most basic elements. Otherwise, you get these kinds of bland, simple movies that don't really have a lot going on in them, aside from the odd standout villain character. They have the skin of the Batman world, but none of the sauce, or just sauce that belongs somewhere else entirely.
Here. Wear a button. Let me just get it on there.
The Batman, though, is all sauce. In fact, it's sometimes all sauce and not enough skin. It takes all the elements that work in the other Batman movies, like the gothic, dreamlike Gotham City from Tim Burton, and the serious crime focus from Nolan, and the effort to make Batman an actual functioning badass from Zack Snyder, and brings it all together in this big old Batman soup where Matt Reeves comes in and adds the last and most important ingredient. Batman. Yep, that's my secret, Cap. I decided to make my Batman movie actually about Batman. Who would have thought?
There's something more emotional and doesn't necessarily know that he's going to save the day. He doesn't know if being Batman is going to work or do anything. He knows that there is no other option. Basically, the options are kind of death or being Batman.
I know I'm doing a whole video on this, and I have a lot more to say obviously, but if you boil it down, the answer to the question in the title really is that simple. He made Batman the main character. Batman has goals and desires and struggles and makes mistakes and shows emotions and has an arc, which aside from like the first third of Batman Begins, I don't think any other Batman movie gives Batman an arc. I mean, I guess there is the whole Martha thing, but that's not good. So for all intents and purposes, this is the first feature-length, non-stupid arc Batman has had in a movie. Kind of a big deal. Virtually every other Batman movie just has Bruce as this finished product. Once he gets into the suit, he's done growing, done being emotional, done being interesting. He is complete. Just this stoic, simple of a character, but not an actual person. Sure, things might happen to him and around him. He might get his back broken and his lady friend might get blown up, but the character of Bruce Wayne is totally unchanging, which again is a result of these filmmakers and actors not viewing Bruce Wayne as an interesting character. Reeves, though, makes that the whole movie. There is so much effort put into everything concerning that character, not just obvious stuff too. Take for example a simple thing like the way the character looks and stands and moves around. In past movies, Batman would just kinda hang out like anybody else. Sure, he might appear out of nowhere and have a scowl on, but he moved and stood like any normal guy. The fact that he was wearing a batsuit was totally incidental to how he acted, aside from the obvious limitations of the actor, you know, being in a batsuit. But in The Batman, Pattinson has a very distinct presence as the Dark Knight. He moves around spaces in a slow, observant, kind of weightless way. Like he's this watchful ghost taking in everything like an emo Sean Spencer, as if he blocks out all incoming information aside from what he wants to see. You literally see him detecting in real time. He also never seems comfortable around people, especially in places where he's boxed in and has a lot of eyes on him, which makes sense since Batman is a very reclusive person. He doesn't want to be seen by people or be in a space that's not fully under his control, so when he is visibly uncomfortable both in and out of the batsuit. When he does make planned appearances as Batman, there is real effort on his part to come off intimidating, slowly approaching from shadows, making sure people can hear every step he takes. His suit is one part function and one part intimidation, and when he speaks, it's again purely to intimidate, referring to himself not as Batman, but as Vengeance, which just further adds to the mystical persona he's adopted.
I'm Vengeance.
He's both intentionally intimidating with his theatrics and intimidating just by how much of a creepy weirdo he naturally is. His skin is pale from a lack of sunlight, he's constantly watching people from a distance or on some recording, which is shown in these intrusive POV shots, making him seem just a bit off and uncaring of other people. He's eerily calm one minute and totally violent the next, and no one in the movie says any of this or monologues about it or has a scene where a thug talks about how scary he is. No, it's all shown to us. We understand how people feel about him purely by their extreme discomfort being in his presence.
Know who I am? Yeah, I got an idea.
These are all minor choices, but they add up to give Batman a very distinct personality, something that, again, for the 100th time, the character just hasn't had in any movie before. There is thought put into everything, how he's framed in a shot, how he moves, how he looks at people, his voyeuristic POVs, it's all given attention. You know exactly what this guy is like just by these simple observations. You don't even need him to say anything for this to be the most personality Batman has ever had on screen. And yet, we also get plenty of scenes of Batman talking, like a lot. In fact, most of this movie is just scenes of Batman fully in costume talking to someone about the plot. He talks to Catwoman, he talks to Gordon, he talks to the Penguin, he talks to the Riddler, he talks to random unnamed characters. My boy be yapping. And since Pattinson isn't doing a terrible over-the-top Christian Bale voice, those scenes don't come off like a joke. They push the story forward, reveal things about Bruce based on his judgments of people like Catwoman, show his trust in people like Gordon. You get so much out of these moments where in past movies, it would just be one-liners or rambling nonsense or like 3 or 4 lines and then he would vanish out of nowhere. Scenes with him talking were only as long as they absolutely had to be because they simply didn't think the audience could take it seriously, because they themselves didn't take any of this shit seriously. They would leave any meaty dialogue scenes for Bruce Wayne, but Reeves understands that Batman is more than capable of carrying a scene just the same, because of course he is. He's a character, he's a person, he has a mouth, he can talk, we can take this shit seriously. It's pretty easy to make work, you just have to do it.
Help you?
Yeah, I thought you were Vengeance.
Your friend got involved with the wrong people. She didn't know any better. Maybe you should have explained it to her.
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
It means your choices have consequences.
Jesus Christ.
There doesn't have to be an action scene to have Batman on screen. Sometimes all you need from him is just him walking around a room and talking, and it's just as cool and effective. Pattinson looks as cool in this scene as he does in this scene, and that is the magic of the movie. Plus, it's what Batman is supposed to be doing most of the time anyway. You know, being a detective, going around, investigating, talking to people, the whole crime-solving routine. And it's not just talking to other people, we also hear him monologue as Batman to himself while he's reading his journal entries, which allows us to really get into his head like never before. You get these deeply personal insights that he would never bring up otherwise. And it works because Batman is not just a silly costume and voice that Bruce Wayne puts on to disguise himself. It's who Bruce is, so it's how he thinks, it's how he talks, it's how he processes the world around him to an extent. It's how he acts as Bruce Wayne also. It's as much a trauma response to his past as it is a way of disguising himself. He doesn't need to be wearing the Batsuit to be Batman because that's who this guy really is.
Murder, robberies, assault. 2 years later, they're all up. And now this.
The movie even does this really unique thing where there is this third persona Bruce has as this drifter biker guy that allows him to go out into the city as a regular guy, which I know doesn't sound very interesting, but it actually adds a nice layer to the movie. Something that's never been addressed in any of these movies is how Batman actually looks for crime, and this is the answer that Matt Reeves comes up with. He uses this third persona to move around Gotham as essentially an ordinary citizen and just looks for crime, riding around on his bike, hanging out on rooftops, walking in the rough parts of the city, scouting out all the areas where he could be needed. Only when he finds crime does he then get into the suit and start cracking skulls. It's a really clever way of making the stealth part of Batman work for this kind of realistic film adaptation, because he can hop around on roofs and ride his bike like a million miles an hour as just a regular guy and realistically remain unnoticed. In this kind of world, you can't just hang out in a giant bat suit all night and expect not to get caught at some point, so for some jobs, the drifter comes in pretty handy.
Hidden in the chaos is the element, waiting to strike like snakes. But I'm there too.
It also works visually to blend Bruce Wayne and Batman together as one person, which is a theme this movie is always going back to. There's all these scenes of him like halfway in between costumes where his hair is all unkept and his eye makeup is still on, and it works to break that traditional status quo that Bruce Wayne and Batman are two separate people. They obviously still are in a very literal sense, but this movie does not portray Bruce Wayne as this perfect chameleon that has this airtight secret identity. He is essentially the exact same guy in every scene he is in. The only thing that changes is his outfit, but he's never pretending to be someone he's not. It just so happens to also work as a cover that his natural persona is this tragic, soft-spoken guy who looks like he's on drugs or at the very least doesn't leave his house much. It's a nice change of pace from the typical idiot playboy Bruce, especially since this Batman is much more emotional and raw raw and angry, and really doesn't even care all that much about how people think of Bruce Wayne. He would prefer no one to ever think about him at all and to never be this famous figure. He hates being that because he's famous for the reason that has ruined his life.
If this continues, it won't be long before you've nothing left.
I don't care about that. Any of that.
You don't care about your family's legacy?
What I'm doing is my family's legacy.
It gives him this great arc too, where at the start of the movie, he's not the typical Batman that is usually found in the comics or in these movies. He's this angry, vengeful vigilante that is driven purely by personal reasons. He saves people and works to stop crime, yes, but it's all about him. It's personal, not heroic. He doesn't even seem to care all that much that innocent civilians are as scared of him as criminals, because he's not doing it for them. He's doing it for the kid he once was and no one else, including himself, by the way. That's why it makes sense that the Batman we meet at the start of this movie has not put any effort into making Bruce Wayne this distinct persona. He doesn't care about Bruce Wayne. He has no interest in leading any semblance of a normal life. So he doesn't, and as a result, Bruce Wayne, as we are used to seeing him, is essentially a dead character throughout the movie. He doesn't yet exist. He is the Batman 100% of the time, fully consumed by his rage and trauma, to the point that, again, he doesn't even refer to himself as Batman. He says, "I'm vengeance," because he's a symbol of fear and vengeance only. That's why his main theme is not heroic or hopeful. It's actually closer to a villain theme. It's meant to evoke the fear you would feel being in his presence, or being watched by him, or being hunted by him. This is not a guy that anyone wants to encounter, criminal or otherwise, which sounds like a version of Batman that's arguably just as far from the comics as any of these previous adaptations that I've spent the whole video talking shit about. So why do I give this one a pass? Well, aside from the fact that every choice made with Batman, accurate or not, is masterfully executed and creative on the part of Reeves and Pattinson and the whole crew, this is also just the Batman at the start of the movie. They don't think this Mr. Vengeance, emo Kurt Cobain version of Bruce Wayne is the end-all be-all final evolution of the character. They set up this kind of lost, emotional, early year vigilante to be the guy that eventually turns into the Batman. That's what the movie is about. It's as much an origin story for the character as Batman Begins, because his arc is not getting into the Batsuit. It's realizing what Batman is and should be, and him learning to let go of his personal vendetta. Early on in the film, Bruce comes off like someone who thinks he knows everything and views the world in very simple black and white terms, showing almost no sympathy for the victims of the Riddler since they were dirty. In fact, he seems to almost empathize with Riddler and understand where he is coming from, acting like those people had it coming.
You make it sound like he had it coming.
He was a cop. Cross the line.
His qualm with him is not that he's targeting these people or that he's this rogue, violent vigilante. It's simply that he's killing them. Even with people like Selina, who isn't a murderer but is part of Gotham's underworld, he judges as less than him and thinks of more or less the same way he views every other criminal. There isn't an ounce of nuance in his worldview. To him, if you commit crime, you are bad and worthy of judgment. But then, as the movie progresses and he unravels the mystery surrounding Riddler and Carmine Falcone, he begins to realize that his childlike, simple way of viewing the world is flawed. Sure, his parents were killed and he was left alone, but he had wealth to survive on and someone like Alfred to care for him. People like Selina didn't have any of that and were forced to survive by other means, which doesn't mean she is above judgment, but his unique position as a billionaire orphan allowed him to never be confronted with these kinds of choices that others might have to make. It's easy for him to claim he's above all of it because he never had to make any hard choices. It's even more apparent with someone like Riddler, who exists exists as this one-to-one parallel to Bruce. They both were these tragic orphan children that felt cheated by life and molded themselves into people capable of taking vengeance on the world. Riddler is inspired by Batman because he is exactly what Riddler and his followers want to be: vengeance. They represent the same things, and because of that, Batman is, in a way, complicit in what happens in the movie. Not only for indirectly helping Riddler at times, but by creating the atmosphere in Gotham necessary for people like him to start popping up.
I'm vengeance.
On top of that, Riddler also exposes Thomas Wayne as being a part of the historic corruption in Gotham, which, along with the realization that he inspired the Riddler, totally shatters his worldview. Like a child, he viewed his parents as these perfect icons and used that as a way of justifying his vengeance. So breaking that reality puts into question everything he's done in response to their death, which, for Bruce, is his entire life. All the people he judged for having it coming and didn't have 1 ounce of sympathy for are now on the same level as his own father. It ruins him, which is really interesting because in the movies we always see him on the moral high ground, or at the very least proven to always be right in the end despite any mistakes. But here his ideals are actually challenged and torn down right in front of him. So his arc throughout the movie is really just him maturing. His rigid, untested, simple ideology is constantly being run up against the realities of the world. All of his assumptions are challenged and mostly proven wrong, and when he finally realizes that, he can then transform into the Batman and leave the vengeance behind, ending the movie not as a symbol of fear, but as a symbol of hope. It's a simple arc when you think about it. I mean, it's just a guy learning to chill out, but only someone like Matt Reeves is capable of pulling it off because he gets Batman. He understands the character, which is essential if you want to subvert the character. That's why it matters to have a guy like him making these movies. You can't get this kind of take otherwise.
I'm starting to see now. I have had an effect here. But not the one I intended.
And that's just one piece of the puzzle. Reeves not only understands the character of Batman more than any past adaptation, but he also has an understanding of the other major pillar of the Batman canon, Gotham City. Gotham, unlike any city, real or fictional, is perhaps the most comically miserable, hopeless, disgusting place one could live. And as such, every movie's take on it varies wildly. You got Tim Burton's famous Tim Burton-y Hollywood backlot Gotham that's probably the most iconic as far as the live-action movies go, for just the sheer vision of it, and it certainly works for his movies, but it's also profoundly unserious. Like, don't get me wrong, it's good, it's cute, it's charming, it's fun, but it doesn't feel like a living, breathing city, and certainly not a city in need of a Batman. And you only see like 2 blocks, a sewer system, and a couple interiors, so it's really not all that well realized. It's much closer to like a metropolized Whoville than anything else. This of course continues on into the Schumacher films and gets even more silly.
Let there be light.
But then you get to Batman Begins, and this is where, up until The Batman came out, where Gotham had the most effort put into it. Granted, not the whole city, but the slums of the East End are about as weird and gross and semi-fantastical as you can get, while also riding that line of realism that Nolan did so well. As far as atmosphere goes, that's where that trilogy shined the most, which is a shame because then with The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, Nolan kinda just gave up on all of that and made Gotham look like the most normal city ever. It's just New York, and everyone is pretty much just a regular New York guy. Batman's driving his car around and they're all like, "Hey, I'm walking here. Go Mets." You get a lot of stuff during daytime, which, you know, it's fine to show Gotham by daylight, but they show it so much that it just seems even more bland and generic and lifeless, and even by night, the city really has no personality, both in the way it looks and how the people are portrayed. It's just completely uninspired. Now, the scenes of Gotham we get in the DCEU are certainly more visually interesting than in the Nolan Nolan films because that's kind of Zack Snyder's whole bread and butter, but again, it fails to capture the personality of Gotham that's needed to make a Batman story work. It's just a neat looking Zack Snyder hellscape where Batman fucking brands people so they get prison shanked. God damn, that's edgy.
Tell me. Do you bleed?
I guess you could also throw in the 60s Gotham, which appears to be a beautiful seaside California town. Wouldn't mind living there.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings. And may be salvaged.
But in the Batman, much like how much attention and focus is given to Bruce Wayne, Gotham City is crafted with so much thought and so much detail and so much effort that it feels like a real place with real people living there. You see the city by day a bit and visit a few of the nicer areas to diversify it some, but the majority of Gotham that we see in this movie is at night, in the rain, in the slums, lit by streetlights or neon signs, or sometimes nothing at all. It looks like hell on earth, but not in a way that's over the top. Just in that it's a town with no hope. There is trash everywhere, graffiti covering every wall. Half the people we see look like they want to rob you or kill you or give you drugs. It has a sense of lawlessness. The architecture is old and gothic, giving it this creepy vibe. Despite the fact that it's a modern setting, it feels like a haunted place and somewhere that's just a bit more off than anywhere else in its own world. It's a city in desperate need of change, and also a city full of people like Bruce Wayne and Edward Nashton and Selina Kyle just waiting to throw on a costume and run amok. That's really the unique part of the Reeves vision of Gotham. It looks the part, it sounds the part, it feels the part, but what gives it that edge is that similar to Batman, it too also has an arc. Taking heavy inspiration from earlier Batman comics, Gotham in the first few years of Batman's crusade is not that dissimilar from a major East Coast American city like New York. It's a bit more run down and a bit more separated from reality, but the crime that rules it is very old school and organized. Mob families like the Falcones and the Maronis run the streets. Cops and lawyers and judges are in the mob's pocket. People like Gordon have yet to gain any power. It's a town ruled by corruption from head to toe. But once Batman comes into the picture, he brings with him not just a new era of justice, but the death of the traditional mob rule of Gotham. People like the Joker and Two-Face and the Penguin take over the old gangs. Supernatural entities like Poison Ivy and Man-Bat and Mr. Freeze and Clayface start to spring up. The city morphs from a hopeless, corrupt, grimy 1970s American city to something out of a fairy tale almost, where everyone seems to have lost their marbles and the cells of Arkham are filled with increasingly strange individuals. The city and its people slowly descend into madness in a way even if Batman is doing a lot of good. And Reeves gives Gotham this same arc in the movie. At the start, all the main threats are mob bosses and the corrupt city officials and corrupt cops, but by the end, they all end up getting picked off by the Riddler, leaving this massive power vacuum both in organized crime and with the cops. That's what that final scene in Arkham is really telegraphing. Not that the Joker is necessarily the next bad guy, but that the era of gangsters and drug kingpins is dead and buried and the time of the costume supercriminal is underway. The same way that the GCPD is going to enter a new era under Gordon as the likely new commissioner. Gotham, like Batman, morphs into the fantastical place out of the comics by the end of the movie, setting the stage for Reeves to take his universe in any direction he wants, and not necessarily a hyper-realistic one. I know there's discourse with the fixation on realism he appears to be going for with things like Oz Cobb and whatnot, which, yeah, is a bit silly, and the movie on the surface gives a similar vibe to Nolan where it tries to minimize the weird comic book elements of Batman, but I think you could easily move this world into the stranger and more supernatural elements of Batman. The realism and grittiness of the movie is, I think, less about trying to minimize the comic roots like Nolan did, and more just a result of the time period Reeves chose to set the movie in. I mean, sure, there are certainly choices that would appear to telegraph a commitment to realism, like the design of the Batsuit and the Mustang Batmobile, which fucking rules by the way, but the city and its people feel a lot closer to the weird parts of Batman than you might think. It's all bubbling under the surface. All the famous heroes and villains of Gotham are there. You might not see all of them, but they're all there just waiting to turn into the people we know them as. That's why he threw in characters like Penguin and Catwoman into the movie when he didn't really have to. I mean, Riddler is the main villain and technically speaking the only guy you need for the story to work. This could have been any random guy, but it's not because Reeves is going out of his way to show these people that we know as they were before Batman changed Gotham, before they became these larger-than-life characters. One by one though, they're all going to go down the same path as the Riddler and Batman and become their true selves. They're all going to find their masks.
You got a lot of cats.
That is why I'm saying that Matt Reeves has reinvented Batman as it exists in film. It's not that he made a good movie, or a realistic movie, or even a movie that's faithful to the comics. It's that he reset the status quo for all future Batman movies. The Batman is a definitive origin story for all of Gotham and every single character that lives in it. It's what this town was before the Batman we know and love comes into the picture, and why Gotham became that way. The movie is him hitting the reset button on what pop culture's view of all this shit is. This is not Batman. This is not Batman. This is not Batman. Even this, for all its greatness, is not Batman. This right here though, down to its core, is the Batman. No matter how future adaptations choose to depict their own Gotham and their own Bruce Wayne and their own versions of all these iconic characters, this right here has become the new blueprint, and I imagine we will see its influence in media long after Reeves is done exploring it. And that's the best part too. We've just begun to dip our feet into the Matt Reeves world. There is one movie and one miniseries right now, and also this comic you should check out, and that's it. And they've already set such a high standard with those that if they keep the quality up, by the time it's done, who knows how legendary this era of Batman is going to be. And if the price for that is them changing the name of a few characters, you know what? I think that's a fair trade. Just as long as they keep focused on what makes this universe so special and they don't blow the whole thing on yet another version of the fucking Joker. If any comic book character has earned a timeout, I think we can all agree it's that guy.